Hey guys, Matthew here from the MMAT YouTube channel. I stumbled across a pretty cool little shotgun on the internet a few weeks ago and I thought I'd make a quick review video on it. It's called a Warrior, although I think that's actually the name of the manufacturer, not the model name. It's made in Turkey and I got mine from Corwin Arms, a fantastic little company out in British Columbia run by a really nice guy named Martin, and I'll get into why he's such a really nice guy in just a little bit. This gun is available either with a 16 or a 20-inch barrel. As you can see, I did choose a 16-inch barrel for mine, and it comes chambered in either 12 gauge, 20 gauge, and 410. I have mine in 20 gauge. The barrels are threaded for chokes. I have a extended modified in the gun right now, and it also comes with an improved cylinder and a full choke as well. Now, for those of you who don't quite understand how chokes work, the tighter the constriction of the choke, you can see the thickness of the wall here. The tighter that is, the more dense the shot pattern is going to be. So the tighter the choke, the farther you're going to be able to shoot. Think of a garden hose. You put your thumb over the end and the water sprays farther. Kind of the same idea here. The gun features a fiber optic styled front sight. Now, I've used this outside some and it doesn't really capture and gather the light like a fiber optic does. It is orange and it does stand out, but it's also plastic, and I don't really like the fact that it's plastic. I don't think it's going to be terribly sturdy, and my fears were sort of confirmed when I looked in here and I found that there was actually a second sight. So I have a feeling that these are sort of expected to break off. Now this is where Martin, the guy at Corwin Arms, comes back into play here. I mentioned this to him, and he has since put in the mail for me a brass bead that will fit in here. So free of charge. Martin, kudos, great customer service. I will be back to your company to buy more things. So the gun is operated by simply pulling back on the trigger guard here, and then the action breaks open, and inside then you would put your 20 gauge, 12 gauge, or 410 shell depending on which model you got, and then you close the action again, pull back on the hammer, and then of course pull the trigger to fire it. Now there's no other safety, it's just a hammer. The neat thing is though, is when the trigger's not being pulled, the firing pin will not protrude into the chamber and activate the gun. You actually have to pull the trigger before that firing pin will come all the way through and actually strike it. So you can just leave the hammer down on a live shell. It's perfectly safe. As you can see, whenever the action is opened, there's an extractor, and you can see that coming out of the barrel of the gun here as I break the action. And what that does is after you fired, it allows you to get a grip on that shell and pull it out after it's been fired. Now, one of the really neat features about this shotgun is that it actually folds completely, which makes it really neat for and convenient for storage and for transportation. So that is one of the things that really makes this kind of a neat little gun. From the factory, it did have a couple of minor issues that I wasn't completely satisfied with. It should be noted that this is not a high dollar gun. At less than $200, brand new, I can live with a few imperfections, and if you listen to the recent episode of Slamfire Radio, I think it's episode 82, you'll know that I actually enjoy shotguns, or sort of any sort of guns that come from the factory not quite perfect, because I really like tweaking them and kind of making them better. This one was no exception. So one of the first things that I noticed was that the sling attachments were going to have to be worked on. This is the first sling attachment that was on the rear. It's plastic, so I knew right away that was going to have to go. And also the width of it isn't really wide enough to accept a proper sling. So I unthreaded it and just simply threaded in a new sling swivel that I just had in my parts bin, and it fits perfectly, so that's no problem. And as for the front, it did have a sort of a metal loop in here, and I just simply cut that loop off, and then I just enlarged the hole slightly so that it will accept standard sized sling swivels. Also, from the factory, the trigger guard was a little bit loose. Fortunately, I just tightened up that screw there a little bit, took the slop out of there, made it nice and tight. Not so tight that you can't activate it, but tight enough that it wasn't wiggling around. I then just put a little bit of thread lock on there to keep it from working itself loose. Also, the trigger was a little bit tight, and so I discovered a post on CGN by Stevo911 underscore, who posted a step-by-step guide to lighten it. And what you do is you simply remove the butt plate, remove the butt stock by taking out the big bolt in here, and then there's a spring. The hammer spring is attached with a spring tensioning screw, and I simply back that screw out about halfway, thread locked it in place, and the trigger pull is now quite acceptable. So there you have it. A neat little shotgun, not very expensive. Looks like it's going to be a lot of fun out in the bush, maybe strapped to the front of the four-wheeler. Who knows? I hope to take some grouse and some rabbits with it later on this season, so stay tuned for that. Thanks again for watching. We'll see you next time.